In this video, we're going to learn about routing in controllers. Specifically, we're going to learn about attribute. But first of all, let me say one thing. This entire section is based on the knowledge that you have already learned from minimal APIs. Because everything is about ASP.NET Core. A lot of stuff are shared. Minimum APIs are based on a lot of technologies that are also used in MVC. So controllers are part of MVC. So therefore, they share almost 100% of the same thing. So therefore, the knowledge that you have already learned from minimal APIs still apply here. And in this section, when we talk about controllers, I mainly just point out some differences here. So let's continue with the routing in controllers. So routing with controllers refer to, well, same thing as minimal API. It refers to the action of mapping HTTP request to a particular action method, right, to an endpoint. So let me come up with this diagram. So we have routing. So routing happens first, and instead of directly routed to an endpoint that is created with Lambda expressions, as what we have done in minimal API, we need to route or map the request to a particular action method inside a controller class. To make this diagram more complete, I need to put the HTTP request over here. So we have the HTTP request right here, and this request needs to be mapped to a particular action method. It may not be this one, may not be this one. It's really based on the principles that we have learned in minimal APIs. So this is the overall concept, right? We're mapping the request to a particular action method. But how does that happen? First of all, how do we even know this class is a controller class? Well, ASP.NET Core has different ways to identify this class as a controller class, which means that the action methods within it are considered as endpoints. The first way to identify a class as a controller class is based on convention. Any public class that ends with the suffix controller is considered as a controller class. So when a request is received by ASP.NET Core, ASP.NET Core will look for a class that ends with the suffix controller and consider that as a potential controller class that contains an endpoint that could be mapped to the request. So that's based on convention. And if your class is not following the convention, for example, instead of calling it department's controller, I just call it department, then how will ASP.NET Core be able to find it? Well, there's another option, which is by using attribute on top of the class, and we can say this is a controller. Right? And you can see from the comments here, it says indicates that the type and any derived types that this attribute is applied to are considered a controller by the default controller discovery mechanism. Okay, so if we do this, then this class is considered as a controller class. But usually people don't do this. Usually people follow the convention. So instead of using the attribute on the class, we can just call the class controller. And this way, the discovery mechanism will be able to locate the class and try to look through the public methods to check whether the action methods can be mapped to the request. So that's how ASP.NET Core discovers a controller class. In order for ASP.NET Core to be able to do what I just said, of course, we need to include the routing middleware. First of all, let's go to program.cs and delete this line. And then we need to add the routing middleware here. So I'm going to say use routing. So this uses the routing middleware. And then, of course, we're going to use endpoints, right? And here we're going to say endpoints.map controllers. So this method is one method that is enough to cover all of the controllers. We don't have to say map to department controller or map to employees controller or map to whatnot controller. Right? Map controllers is one method that can help ASP.NET Core to locate all of the controllers. And this is one way to do it. This is the old way to do it. We're creating endpoints, and we recognize that controller action methods are considered as endpoints. Therefore, we use the map controllers method inside the use endpoints method as lambda expressions. But as you can see, this is not the recommended way to do it. The recommended way is to use top-level root registrations, right, instead of using endpoints. So this is the same message that we receive when we talk about minimal APIs. So therefore, this works, but an equivalent way is to use top-level endpoint registration, which is just to say app.mapControllers. Okay, so this works the same way as the traditional way, the old way. So in this video, let's follow the traditional way. Okay, we're defining endpoints, and we're defining endpoints through all of the controllers. And first of all, we use the routing middleware. So routing middleware coupled with map controllers will help ASP.NET Core to find controllers and locate corresponding action methods. So with the map controllers, it's not enough because mapping controllers require some services, and those services need to be added to the services collection. And for that, we need to do it with the builder object here. So we're going to say builder services, and we're going to say add controllers. There are a couple of different methods here. So we have add controllers, and we have add controllers with views. Add controller with views are for the supporting of Razor views, which is to create user interface. We're going to talk about that later. In this section, we're going to use add controllers. Those add controllers add the basic services that is required by map controllers method. Okay, so with these three different lines of code or three different methods here, we are able to locate controllers, and we are able to map request to a particular action method. Now we're able to locate the action method, but the actual routing is based, remember we mentioned this, the actual routing is based on the combination between the HTTP method and the root template. Both the HTTP method and the root templates are not specified yet. So still, it's not able to locate the action method. We need to provide those two missing information here. So one way to do it is to use attribute. That's why this is called attribute routing. So what attribute do we need to use? For the method, we can use attributes starts with HTTP. You can see we have HTTP delete, get, head, options, patch, post, put. Everything is included here. And in this particular case, we're getting department. That's why we're going to use HTTP get. But this is just a method. Another missing element is the root template. How do we specify a root template? We have another attribute that is called root. And then here we can specify the template as a parameter. So for example, in this case, I'm going to do /department. And with these two attributes here, the routing middleware will be able to map a HTTP request to this particular action method as long as the roots are /departments and the method that is used is HTTP get. And by the way, if you remove the HTTP method attribute here and only leave the root attribute, then any HTTP method, whether it's HTTP get, HTTP post, HTTP put, or HTTP delete, or anything else, can be mapped to this get department's action method as long as the root corresponds to the root that is specified in the root attribute. And for the second action method, of course, we're going to copy and paste it. And over here, we are going to use a different template, and we're going to specify the ID as a root parameter, which will be automatically extracted and passed into this action method as a parameter. So we learn about model binding, which also works in action methods as part of the controller here. We're going to talk about model binding later, but right now you can understand this, right? This is the same thing as minimal API. All right, with all of these changes, we should be able to use these action methods as endpoint handlers. So let's give it a try. Let's run the application. Okay, the application is running. The root path here, of course, is going to return HTTP error 404 because we never specified a controller and its action method that is mapped to the root path. So that's fine. I'm going to go to /department. So this is going to go to the first action method. And let's hit enter. Okay, so we got the correct information back. These are the departments. So this is correct. And then we're going to try to hit the second one. I'm going to provide an integer number. Let's provide 100 and let's hit enter. And then we got the correct information back. Department information regarding 100, right? ID 100. So you can see that this is what we specified here, and this hard-coded string is what we specified here. So you can see that the routing actually works. But you might say, well, this is so complicated. Why do we need 2 attributes instead of 1? Well, there is a easier way to do this. Instead of using a separate root attribute to specify the root template, you can actually specify the root template within the HTTP method attribute. So here, as you can see, we can specify the root template right here. So let's copy this and paste it over here. And then let's delete it. Okay. And for this one, we're also going to do the same thing. I'm going to copy it and paste it over here. And let's delete attribute. And let's give it a try again. This should also work. Let's test the 2 different endpoints. Let's go to the first one, departments. And we got the correct response. And now let's go to maybe 999. And we got the correct response as well. So you can see that we have different options we can use. ASP.NET Core provides you with different options. How you want to use it, it's up to you. So it looks like the root attribute is not useful since we can just use this. But the root attribute can actually provide us with a base path when it is applied on top of the controller class itself. For example, if I say root and then I'm going to go API, so this is going to become the prefix for the root template. Of course, here I cannot use / because this is referring to the root. So let me delete that and delete that. So now for this class, if I want to route to this particular action method, then I have to go /API/department. And if I want to go to this action method, I have to go to /API/department/the So let's give it a try and see whether that works or not. Now we are hitting the root path. Let's go to departments without the API prefix. Okay, and you can see that we received 404 not found. So in order to actually hit the departments action method, we have to go to API/departments. And let me hit enter here, and you can see we got the same results as before. And now if I go to 88, I also received the same response as before, except this time we have the API as the prefix. So you can see that the root attribute is not a waste of time. It really depends on how you want to use it. And those are the main differences between routing in minimal API and routing in controllers. Everything else that we learn about routing in minimal API still applies here. For example, root template structure, root parameters, root parameter constraints. They all work the same way here. Those knowledge still applies. And in the next video, we're going to talk about a different way of routing. So that's everything I want to talk about in this video. I will see you in the next one.